covering climate, weather, and the industrial enterprise from Penn State Meteorology. Here is Up in the Air.
Welcome to this week's episode of Up in the Air. I'm Kasey Reigner.
And I'm Ryan Gold.
So Ryan, as many of us know, Hurricane Florence devastated the Carolinas. North Carolina specifically, some areas saw 20 to 30 inches of rain. I do have friends and family down there. They are safe, but what can you tell me?
Well, like you said, they had an immense amount of rainfall, record-breaking, even for just the first hurricane to make landfall for the season. Who knows what could else creep on up here in the country. Some people did have to stand on the top of their houses during this flooding that happened there, and it was really, really tragic.
Very tragic. So sad. We're definitely praying for all of our friends down in the Southeast. We do have features on this week's episode of people returning back home to the Carolinas, as well as the devastating red tide on Florida's southwest Gulf Coast and record-breaking rainfall in Pennsylvania. We also have an interview with special guest Tucker Antico, VP of the Weather Risk Club. But first, here's an update in the air.
A caravan of cars lit back into North Carolina's Outer Banks this past weekend when the evacuation orders were lifted. Dare County officials authorized residents who live north of Oregon Inlet to return to their homes at 7 a.m. on Saturday the 15th. When the state's Transportation Department cleared North Carolina's Highway 12 of sand and determined it and the Bonner Bridge safe and undamaged, residents of Hatteras Island were also allowed to return to their homes at 2:30 p.m. that same Saturday. While the residents of the Outer Banks are allowed to return home Saturday, visitors were not permitted to return until the afternoon on Sunday the 16th. Residents are back in their homes, glad to be rid of the first hurricane to make landfall this season.
This past rainy summer shattered records. It has been a wet, soggy summer for most parts of Pennsylvania. According to AccuWeather, the Wilkes-Barre-Scranton International Airport received 4.34 inches of rain on August 13th. The old daily record was set during Hurricane Connie in 1955 when 2.5 inches fell. From June 1st to mid-August, Harrisburg received 19.43 inches of rain. A normal total for that time span is 9.71 inches. It was the wettest summer on record for State College with a total of 20.72 inches of rain from June 1st to mid-August. The previous record was 19.23 inches back in 2003. It rained 40 days out of a consecutive 76-day period here in State College. Typically, it rains 1 out of every 3 or 4 days in the season. July ranked as the 4th wettest since records began in 1895. Central Pennsylvania saw a drastic amount of rainfall from July 20th to July 25th. But just how much rain did we have? A total volume of water was 2.1 trillion gallons. Let me put that into perspective for you. Enough rain fell during this 5-day period to fill 3.3 million Olympic-sized swimming pools. That's equivalent to a 34,000-mile deep area covering a baseball field. And this volume weighed in at a whopping 9.2 billion tons. Numerous counties across the state experienced flooding. Bradford County had the most flash flood warnings with a total of 21 warnings from June 1st to August 31st.
When you hear the words solar panel and wind turbine, you probably think renewable energy, right? Well, what if I said now you can think climate change? According to a team of researchers from the University of Maryland's Department of Atmospheric and Oceanic Science, quote, wind and solar farms offer a pathway to clean renewable energies. However, they can also significantly change land surface properties and may lead to unintended climate consequences, end quote. Using 3 different scenarios for the Sahara Desert, a wind farm, a solar farm, and a combination of the two, the team came to an interesting conclusion. They discovered that wind turbines would cause warmer air from above to mix with cooler air below, creating more heat closer to the surface, increasing temperatures by 4 degrees. Turbines would also affect the smoothness of the desert surface, which would slow winds in this region. This combined with the heat could increase moisture and increase the average rainfall by up to 20/5 of a millimeter a day. Solar farms would decrease the reflectivity and increase the maximum temperature by 2 degrees as well, increasing the precipitation by up to 1/13 of a millimeter. If these two farms were combined, the estimated effects of precipitation could increase to 59ths of a millimeter, nearly 1.5 times higher than normal. This would eventually lead to an increase in plant life, bringing a little green into the sea of sand.
The whale shark is the largest fish in the world, reaching 40 feet in length and weighing tens and thousands of pounds. In July, a 26-foot-long whale shark was found dead on Sanibel Island on Florida's southwestern Gulf Coast. Marine scientists aren't quite sure how it died, but they suspect the Carenia brevis algae, a single-celled organism that's currently in massive bloom cycle called the red tide. 100 manatees, a dozen dolphins, thousands of fish, and 300 sea turtles and more have died or washed along shores in putrid-smelling amounts. The culprit? Red tide. It's a seasonal, normal occurrence along the southwest coast of Florida. This past summer's red tide was the worst since 2006. So bad that State Governor Rick Scott declared a state of emergency because Florida's tourism industry was hit hard by the tenacious bloom. Florida businesses report $90 million in tourism losses. When the neurotoxin goes airborne, it can cause respiratory issues, including asthma. Lifeguards in the hardest hit stretches of the shoreline even wore gas masks to avoid the toxic conditions. According to the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, found it impacted 145 miles of coastline. What can be done about the red tide? Well, not much. There are some experimental designs up in the air involving introducing competing algae that would steal from K. brevis. But these ideas are quite away from coming out of the lab and into seas. In the meantime, we could just wait and pray for the fish.
Weather is a dangerously powerful thing that has the ability to leave a devastating impact. Therefore, a new competitive project called Call for Code was created, and for the winner, a grand prize of $200,000. This project, which is backed by IBM with support from the American Red Cross and the United Nations Human Rights Office, asks for software engineers to save millions of lives by building systems which will improve disaster preparedness. Even though meteorologists have improved their skills in the last 20 years, the atmosphere is holding more moisture, making storms worse, and rising seas provide more water for storm surges. Along with this, people living in disaster-prone areas are skyrocketing. Each software engineer hopes to have their solution implemented by the IBM's Corporate Service Corps in 2019 and helps to save millions of lives during the next disastrous event.
From drought to flood in 2 weeks, welcome to the great city of San Antonio. A month ago, the city was a hot, dry semi-desert. Barely any rain fell in August, with only 0.62 inches recorded at the San Antonio International Airport. Then in as little as 2 weeks, everything changed. Lawns that were once dry, crisp, and brown have transformed into fields of rain lilies and mushrooms. Rivers are running high again, with some looking ready to spill their banks soon. Though San Antonio got a taste of drought that caused wildfires out west, earlier this month, weather patterns began to shift to a more tropical influence from the Gulf. Gerald Mulvey, a meteorology professor at the University of the Incarnate Word, explained, "With moist air moving in, all the ingredients for storm development were now present. Moisture, wind shear, and a source of lift. More than 11 inches of rain have been recorded so far in September. That makes this month the third wettest September on record. Weather records go back to the 1880s, so there's a good chance that this month could set a new record."
Welcome back, everyone. This week we have Tucker Antigo, the former president of the Weather Risk Club, joining us. Thank you, Tucker, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So, Tucker, the Weather Risk Club here at Penn State is a pretty unique club to Penn State specifically. I know Weather Risk is a relatively new field in meteorology. What can you tell us about it?
Yeah, so weather risk is often the forgotten about piece of meteorology. You know, people think of on-air broadcasting and research when they speak about going into meteorology. Weather risk is more about the private sector, and a lot of the companies across the United States hire meteorologists to do work in the weather risk field. And this can be insurance, this can be in commodity trading, it could even be in candy companies. Mars Candy is a place that we've had alumni go to. And it's really great that you have another aspect of meteorology that really can open up a huge window for a lot of people who don't want to do necessarily communications or research.
Okay. And now, does the training to go into weather risk, is that any different between a regular, say, meteorology program? Do you guys need to do finances, any other specific kind of classes?
Yeah, so I mean, it's all your basics. Forecasting is a big one. You have, of course, your basic communications, which is important in any field of meteorology, but especially focusing on trading and how the economy works as a whole, because it's more focused on how weather is going to affect money and industry, and that's where those courses really come in handy for the future.
Well, recently we just had Hurricane Florence that went, and of course you and I both know, as well as our viewers at home, devastated the Carolinas last week. And what can we expect? Is there any impacts we can expect here in Pennsylvania from the storm, or is it more of a localized Carolina issue for them?
Yeah, well, every storm affects the economy, and that affects everyone in the United States as a whole. With this recent storm Florence, there are energy companies that I know were affected in commodities. So it might not be as bad as a storm that maybe hits the Gulf Coast, but every time you have something, a big impact like this, it sends a ripple effect. And in this case, maybe you'll see oil or energy companies bumping up prices just a little bit to make up for losses from this storm.
You just mentioned that the Gulf Coast in relevance to Florence. Is there a reason why the Gulf Coast would have a bigger impact than North Carolina?
Yeah, well, a lot of oil refineries, as I'm sure a lot of people know, are along the Gulf Coast. So with Hurricane Katrina, for example, that prompted the U.S. government to open up some of the oil reserves to make up for the losses and to balance the economy. And these are the big impacts that the government and all these private companies really hire meteorologists for, because these are the risks that force people to lose money. This is why it's weather risk. And with the ability to predict this, we can really minimize those risks and save money for these companies.
All right, well, thank you very much, Tucker. I know weather risk is certainly something I'm going to take a look at, and that's all we have time for about weather risk. But right now, we're going to go over the tweet of the week.
Welcome back to the show. So Ryan, we have seen a lot of rain here in Pennsylvania. Thank you to Florence. I don't know about you, but I'm not a fan of the rain.
No, I definitely do not like the rain, especially when I have to swim to class because it's so flooded in certain areas.
Thankfully, we didn't see the rain at the game this Saturday against Kent State. It was very sunny. A lot of me and my friends have some sunburn. That was unexpected. So
yeah.
Let's head over to Mike Susko at the Climate Wall. Mike, any good news?
Well, if you're not a fan of the rain, I can tell you the sun will be sticking around at least for this weekend. And if you don't want to get sunburned, then you're going to need to make sure you're covered up. But taking a look at the climate info for September 20th, we can see that we have an average high of 71 degrees for this time of year. So we're just about to go back into the 60s. So if you like cooler weather, hang in there. We're almost at that point in the calendar. 52 for our average low this time of year, and our record high back in 1932 was 9 degrees. Luckily, we will not see anything like that in the coming weeks, and we also will not see anything near 34 like we did back in 1959, especially with a temperature outlook like this across the nation. You can see above normal temperatures all across the southeastern part of the United States, especially around Atlanta, Tallahassee, and Jacksonville, and also extending out into the Four Corners region, where they are dealing with with more drought. Unfortunately, we've been seeing this all summer, and it looks like it will be continuing into the fall. We are having below normal temperatures for the Northern Rockies and Northern Plains, so up there, they're starting to get that Canadian air that we start to see around this time of year, and it's going to get a little cooler, not much, but nonetheless, it will be a little bit below average. Around here in State College and for Pennsylvania, we have a chance to be slightly above average during this period of September 25th to October 1st. Now keep in mind, slightly above average is from that relative time point in the year. Our average high is 71 degrees. So that means 74, 75 is slightly above average. We will not see anything like 85 or 90, luckily. Taking a look at the precip outlook, again, you can see pretty much all across the central United States and in the Northern Plains and Northern Rockies, we will see above normal temperatures. But again, unfortunately, it looks like here in the Four Corner region, we will see below normal temperatures, just not a good scenario, especially when you are dealing with drought, as long as they have been. But up here to the northern parts of the Rockies and extending into Oregon and California, you can see having a good chance for above normal precipitation, and also in here in Texas and Oklahoma, where they have been dealing with a drought all summer. So it looks like they, or at least weather pattern-wise, will get some relief from the drought. Here in Pennsylvania, we will see, again, just a slightly chance for above normal precipitation for this time block of September 25th to October 1st. especially in the central parts of the state and to the western Pennsylvania areas. In eastern Pennsylvania, it looks like we will be just on the money with average precip for this time of year. Looking at the drought monitor again, you can see that we are dealing with drought mostly in the Four Corner region, where we're seeing these darker reds and oranges popping up. And as we saw with the precip monitor, it does not look like that weather pattern is going to change anytime soon. But the good news is we will see, at least pattern-wise again, that the precip might come back on for Texas and Oklahoma, where you can see they're still dealing with some drought, but nothing like we saw over the summer where we had all that dark red all over the area. Back here in Pennsylvania, we are drought-free. So we are doing very well in that, and that's not surprising, especially with all the rain we've been seeing in September and over the summer. Taking a look at the weekend forecast, we will be seeing temperatures on the average side, 72 for Saturday and 70 for Sunday. And that's because Sunday, Kasey and Ryan, we will be seeing a little more clouds than Saturday, but no rain, so that's a good thing.
That is good news. I could take that forecast 300 days out of the year. I don't know about you, Ryan.
I would love that kind of forecast.
That's all the time we have for this week's episode of Up in the Air. I'm Kasey Reigner.
And I'm Ryan Gold.
Make sure you check us out next week, Up in the Air.